All right, so hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar 14 and thank you for joining us. Today we have a good lineup of presenters. We have Elvia Melendez Ackerman with the San Juan Ultra Network, and we also have Christopher Raymond presenting on the VIVA Plan project and the ENVISION project. So we can go ahead and get started with you, Elvia, if you want to start sharing your screen. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me put this in presentation mode. And can you see it in presentation mode?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me to introduce the our network, San Juan Ultra. We've been at it for a little over 10 years, and it's been quite an adventure for all of us involved. Today, I'm going to give part of the talk, and Tisha Munoz, who is the founder of San Juan Ultra. I first met her when she was a graduate student doing her dissertation. And let me tell you, she is the leader. She is our true leader in this network. I am, of course, the representative of San Juan Ultra to the NATURA network. So she and I will give the presentation today. And just to give you a little overview, we're going to talk about the San Juan Ultra science, the impacts of green infrastructure knowledge and action in the urban tropics. We're going to give you a summary of green infrastructure research that has been done in San Juan and some of it in Santo Domingo. And then we're going to talk about collaborations that we've made with practitioners in the community. San Juan Ultra we've always viewed it from the inception as a knowledge action network that is composed of many organizations that are academic, non-academic. Some of the non-academics are NGOs, community organizations, community leaders, but there are also individuals in the network. When we started out, and this we've never forgotten, we started out focused on San Juan, but we also view ourselves in this process of doing social ecological research as a process that would be like peeling the onion. We focus in San Juan, and as we grow, we would expand and do other things, other cities, other networks. And I think in that respect, we've been very successful. So I'm gonna turn, I think this is where Tisha comes in. Do you want me to keep managing the slides?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Elvia, and thank you for inviting me to co-present here and give me an opportunity to wake up early, 7 in the morning here, and be with you guys. And sometimes it's been hard to make some of the webinars, so I'm glad that I was able to make it this time and join you all and meet you. So as Elvia said, we started the network in 2010, and it was initially as funded by the National Science Foundation and the Forest Service as a way to establish these long-term research areas. The NSF program actually was only 3 years, but we have been able to maintain the network because of the collaboration contribution of everyone involved in all the institutions. Then the Forest Service has been able to provide a lot of the sort of institutional support, through myself and some funding, but really this has been an effort in teamwork and I think a lot of excitement of folks in really being able to develop work and research in an area that a lot of us in a way we're new to, and that being a tropical city and in the context of Latin American and Caribbean, there wasn't really much in the literature about. So we were excited to undertake a lot of different activities that we were also seeing in other networks, like the long-term research ecological network and many others that we knew about, but really try to get it going in this context. So so again, this in terms of research, we really initially focus on the city as a social ecological system from an interdisciplinary perspective, and really trying to focus on developing the knowledge base in this urban tropical system, but also through a lot of activities involving the community and planners and so on, and multiple of the research projects themselves, as well as a lot of education outreach. And we also see as a network building, as like Elvia said, as a knowledge action network. And a lot of what we've been doing is trying to link knowledge action to make science relevant. And so we'll be presenting a little bit of what these activities look like over the presentation. But I wanted to, next slide. I wanted to go back into our initial research questions when we first started our work, because I realized kind of as I was giving this presentation that these questions are still very much relevant and really much still driving how what we're trying to accomplish in the city in terms of a social ecological system, but also looking forward into the future and the extent that the system is, moving towards sustainable and resilient and adaptive capacity trajectories. And initially we focused on the Rio Piedras River watershed, which is this green area outline within the San Juan municipality. And this watershed is going to be also important for you to know later, as we talked about what our current green infrastructure efforts are with city practitioners. But it was a watershed purely almost entirely contained within the city. So it also gave us an opportunity to really see this as an urban social ecological system. But like Elvia said, we really expanded and looked beyond to the city. And then we're also doing work at the metro level. So it's just a kind of like an entry point, and then it allows us to look at the city from these various layers. And next slide. Our conceptual framework, as we initially started, really was trying to look at the city as a system. And we even included, not just in terms of the governance and the social economic dynamics of the city, we did separate out or kind of characterize more the infrastructure of the city itself by focusing green infrastructure and gray infrastructure, and trying to really get a sense of that in the city. But I would say that in the first years, and you will see later that we really focus more on a social ecological system. We kind of ignore or put aside that gray stuff, and that'll change later. But for the beginning, we really there was really not a lot of information or view or studies around green infrastructure within the city. But we were still trying to look at it not just from like a ecology in the city or green infrastructure in the city, but from a systems perspective, and see the role that it has in the sustainability of the city, and how it's also affected by different, historical developments and external drivers. Next slide. And so I'm just going to give you a really broad overview in terms of our research and work from the first 5 or so years, when that was our main focus, is really to bring up this knowledge I was really lacking from a social ecological systems perspective. Then Elvia is going to take a deeper dive into the green infrastructure work itself. But at first, we needed to just really establish what our system looked like, put green areas on the map. Nobody had done that. We had very coarse data on land use, but we were able to do much more work with remote sensing and other technologies to really assess the level of green in our city. And again, Elvia will be able to describe that more. But again, as an interdisciplinary group, we were also looking at climate conditions in the city and the metro area, diversity and aquatic systems from river to watershed, and the governance networks around land use, green areas, and so on. So really, we were giving a lot of multiple dimensions to the city, from household to community to city to a watershed scales. And this work, next slide, really became, setting the stage for questioning also also what power, perspectives, explanations, theories from what we've known so far from an urban, from a global north perspective, cities in Europe and North America, and mostly temperate zone cities, and how these apply to the urban tropics. We really didn't have much to point to. So we decided to compile a lot of this information. Then we have a special issue out that you can find in Ecology and Society, a 2014 issue where we really try to synthesize and pull a lot of this information together. And that has been really helpful, not only to scientists in Puerto Rico and broadly, yes, it really set that stage of urban research even, but it also now, 10 years later, it's been able to contribute to a broader literature review about urban forestry and ecological systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. So this work has been studies like what Elvia has done. It has been featured in this recent urban forestry and urban greening review. So it just helped us, really get a sense of what the impact was of that science and how there's still so much work to be done. But it is an advancement that we have in terms of urban tropics. And then next slide. As a summary of the, do you have that? There we go. During this time also, there was a kind of nascent interest from planners, NGOs that traditionally have mostly worked in protected areas or rural areas in Puerto Rico, also around the urban ecosystems. And before, people didn't really realize that they lived, in a Rio Piedras watershed, and that there was a river running right through the city. And so part of this work was really kind of putting these things on the map and having people see their city in a different way and see their green areas as part of where they live. And so in a way, it just really helped increase that awareness. And so we partner with the municipality. At that time, they were very interested we'll get into this in a little bit too, about the flood risk and urban flood risk in San Juan. It's a very tropical, wet city. And so one of the main concerns they had is flood risk management, urban river floods, and they were very interested in the role of green areas. So we worked with them in a series of seminars, public awareness activities, and they ended up creating a resolution on the importance of green areas for flood risk management in the city. And as far as I know, it's the first one that I've seen in Puerto Rico to actually make it in paper, though. Unfortunately, we never saw that it actually went all the way to become a municipal code. But it did have still today had an impact on planners within the municipality as a value of these areas. And that also comes to play again in the recent activities we're doing now. Next slide. That's my timer. Okay, so just really quick in terms of the last 5 years, though, we've gone from looking at the Rio Piedras River watershed and focusing on San Juan to really expanding to other urban watersheds in the Caribbean. We've been doing work in Santo Domingo, and Elvia will also be talking more about that. And we've also joined a larger network of cities through the Urban Resilience to Extreme Events Sustainability Research Network. More recently, the SETS Convergence, which is also a network extended from the UREX-SRN, and now with you all in NATURA. So we've actually, been able to get harness and leverage these experiences and learnings from other cities, so that we can better assess, how the San Juan as a part of that larger city of that are trying to do this kind of research and work on the ground. Most importantly, next slide. When we joined the Urban Resilience to Extreme Events Network, that was when we really started to pay even closer attention to San Juan in the context of extreme weather events. And that was, 2006 or so that we joined this network of of 10 cities across the US and Latin America, and address, extreme events like heat, drought, coastal and urban flooding, but with the SETS framework as really the driving lens of how we approach these and how we view our cities. And as you saw in our earlier look at the conceptual framework, even though we had acknowledged and really tried to look at our city in an integrated perspective, we really were just doing social ecological research. That was our starting point. But as soon as we started working in the UX, next slide, and then the next slide, we had Hurricane Maria in 2017, and this was a very transformative event in a way to actually finally let us see the city as a social ecological system, technological system. Next slide. Because the not seeing it that way was showing a lot of blind spots that we had initially, in terms of how all the interconnectedness that are among these systems, and the failures that the green infrastructure led to, then with the combination of governance failures and so on. And yet, the ecological systems quickly rebounded, and were really a lesson in resilience and how resilient are our systems. And then as we're moving on to recovery efforts, a lot of our work really becomes a question of okay, to what extent can our knowledge and our ability to look at the city as a system help with thinking about the future resiliency and sustainability of the city. So next slide. We've been, documenting, reflecting, and cataloging our knowledge that we've been obtaining with the collaboration in this network and the transdisciplinary collaborations with engineers, ecologists, other social scientists in this extensive network, and lessons from other cities to really try to better understand what we were seeing in San Juan after Hurricane Maria, but also to really move forward and think about what are the sustainable pathways that we want to see for the city post-hurricane. And so at that time, we were also already building urban future scenarios for the city. Next slide. And this is a central effort that in the UX we've been doing with all the cities. And so just prior to Hurricane Maria, we had a workshop with multiple stakeholders from different sectors in the city and developed these long-term, what does San Juan look like in 2080, of what is a city adapted to flooding, what are transformative scenarios of energy and food security, of a connected city, of a just city, and all of these involved green infrastructure strategies, and they happen to be the most preferred strategies that these different stakeholders have, in addition to also some gray and social strategies, but also nature-based solution really became a dominant theme here. And so now what we're trying to move forward is, next slide, is we put together these scenarios and descriptions of them, including their narratives, the strategies and maps, and in ways that we can share that with our different partners in Ultra and beyond. We have this story map that a student and now postdoc of ours, Robert Hobbings, helped us develop. And so all the scenarios are included in this story map. And I invite you to check them out. And now we're going to be using this as a platform to then work on transitions and how we can most apply these on the ground. So but before we come back to that, Elvia we're going to shift gears a little bit. So Elvia can talk to you more about the green infrastructure work specifically that we have done, and then we'll come back to talking about the more practice work.
Yeah, and I'll apologize in advance for the noise that is in the background. So one of the things that early on San Juan Ultra started doing is characterizing a green infrastructure as a resource, where it was, what are the social ecological drivers for that green infrastructure, and what in the hopes that can guide us to the answers as to what are the areas of opportunities for green infrastructure improvement. So as Tisha said, one of the first things that San Juan Ultra did was to provide these high resolution maps for green infrastructure cover. And as it turns out, San Juan, compared to other cities, San Juan has a lot of green space, but there is a lot of space that is also kept in private hands in residential space. And this was important, at least from the point of view of planning, urban planning, because this space is often invisible to planners. And then after the development of these maps, concentrating in residential spaces was at least a goal in the network and in my lab. Tisha also mentioned that we expanded the production of green maps. In this particular work, the idea was to see associations, to look for associations between green cover and social factors, such as income, like it has been done in many cities around the world. And we don't find in San Juan this relationship with income and education. However, other works by Santiago and collaborators have point out to the potential relationships between green space and income, for example, in more subtle ways. This is a work where we were trying to associate the accessibility to parks and recreational facilities to the percentage of populations in service. And you can see very clearly that in low-income communities, low-income communities have much less access to parks and recreational facilities than the more affluent communities, which have much more accessibility compared to the rest of the population. We've also been looking at the changes of green space in residential areas, and this is an example by Santiago and collaborators as well, where they looked at the changes in increases, how increases in field space in individual lots translated into reductions in urban space. And this was unequal. This reduction in green space at the lot level also led to more fragmented green space in these residential communities. And again, this was not equally seen in all communities explored. This is an example of a study by Santiago and collaborators where they looked at the preference of people that are using public plazas for green features. This public plaza is real, is in Rio Piedras. And these are examples of the choice experiment conducted where users of this public space preferentially indicated that they would prefer green features in their spaces. A lot of the work that I've done in my lab has focused, as I said, in residential space, and we've done social and vegetation surveys across different residential spaces of the Rio Piedras watershed with the idea to know about the diversity, the quality and quantity of residential yard space. And this schematic right here summarizes some of the things that we found. We know that yard size is a major driver of diversity, density, and amount of green space in residential yards. We know that income and education are not necessarily drivers, but being an owner, an older resident results in more diversity and more plants in yards. Residents don't spend a lot of money in their yards, they do recognize a lot of ecosystem services by trees in their yards, more so than these services. And let me turn this off. We also know that there are external factors that may also influence what's there. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go through the following slides quickly. We know that residents, a lot of the residents consume foods that are consumed in their yards, but produced in their yards, but that those residents that have bigger yards and the upper watershed do more. We know that the nursery trade is probably a major influence of the composition of plants in their yards. Over 90% of the plants are non-natives, and that's what not dominates residential yards. We also know that there's a lot of plant given, a plant exchange among residents, and that probably provides a social driver for plant dispersal across the system. We also know that historical factors may also be important as to what is there. Once something is planted, it tends to remain there for a long, long time. Based on plant functional characteristics, we've made suggestions about how to prioritize plants for management of invasive species. The network has used a lot the iTree tool, which was developed by the Forest Service, and we've given workshops to individual managers and schools at different levels. This work with iTree was driven by the U.S. Forest Service. It started training individuals in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, and that has sort of grown like a mushroom. We've given workshops in collaboration with the Forest Service in Santo Domingo, and some of our students in El Salvador, Guatemala, as well as other cities in Puerto Rico. Using iTree was very instrumental following Hurricane Maria, because we were able to document the ecosystem service loss in some areas of the city. We know that residential areas lost 26% of their stems, and that translated into huge increases in some of the ecosystem services provided by trees, like reduction of stormwater and reduction of air pollution. We've been starting to look at products that have been produced through different networks as to how much services this green cover in San Juan provides, say, in terms of thermal regulation. But I think that if you had to ask me what is the most important contribution of San Juan Ultra for the city, are these models of co-production, which are novel in terms of looking at what people want, letting stakeholders participate and establish goals, and then attempting to model and design. That is something very that has been very important for the city. And of course, with as a network, have joined other networks that like NATURA, that look at nature-based solutions as an important strategy for urban resilience. Now I'm gonna end up by saying that from San Juan Ultra and from the San Juan Ultra science, I think that made possible the development of other networks, such as the Alliance for the Rio Piedras watershed, which has been having conversations with the Department of Natural Resources and the Army Corps of Engineers in what they consider the major project for Puerto Rico, a project that plans to channel major sections of the Rio Piedras River, which for a network like us, is especially troubling because it would be a channel that it's deeper and wider than this. And this is what the Army Corps calls the STAR project, channel project, flood control project for Puerto Rico. So the Alliance, which is an offshoot of the is a network that came out of the San Juan Ultra Network, made by professionals from that network, has been trying to have discussions with different organizations about how can we transform this project into something that takes its principles. We recently participated, the Alliance recently participated with the Institute for Landscape Architects in Puerto Rico to develop or to implement a charrette, where we looked at this project and collaborated with architects and the community and members that participated in what things how can we reimagine this project. And this is an example of some of the products of that charrette, where architects who gave their time freely looked at the Army Corps project and contrasted it with alternative strategies that could be done instead. And I don't know if Tisha wants to say something here.
I think we're out of time, but just to let everyone know that we have these monthly seminars that if you wanted to join and learn more about, and we've had folks talk about NATURA and other networks as well. So we'll happy to have you join us.
That'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvia and Tisha. We don't have time for questions right now, so we're just going to go right into Chris's presentations. But thank you so much. Chris, are you ready to start sharing your screen?
Yes. We just have to, other person has to stop sharing screen. Great, thank you. I sometimes have problems with screen sharing here. If I go into screen.
We can see it, but you need to start the.
Yeah. Which view can you see now? The full screen view or?
Nope, not yet.
After I can change this around here.
Okay, now you need to switch your display. Yeah,
is that better? Yeah.
There you go.
Perfect.
Yep.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. Professor Christopher Raymond. I'm linked to the Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Science at the University of Helsinki. I'm also, as you can gather from my accent, originally from Australia. So yeah, moved to the other side of the world to be part of a range of exciting research projects as well as networks. I'm going to be talking mainly about these two network/projects that I'm leading today, called the VIVA Plan and ENVISION projects. But before I do that, you may want to know what HELSIS is, and I think it's important to talk about this very briefly, recognizing it's a new way of doing business on sustainability science and dare I say, also nature-based solutions at an institutional level within universities. So Helsinki stands for the Helsinki Institute of Sustainability Science. It is, interestingly, an interdisciplinary research institute which has buy-in from 7 faculties across the university. It has 7 faculties and 11 professors across those faculties involved, with the mission to empower societies to transform towards sustainability. A very strong emphasis on societal impact of research and education, and to co-produce alternative solutions. It also has an important knowledge brokering role at providing synthesized knowledge for society. And the university has committed to these 11 professors and a range of other support staff for the life of the tenure of these positions. So it's an ongoing commitment So it's not tied just to project funding. But in terms of my interest in nature-based solutions, many of you, I'm sure you've seen this Eclipse work going back to 2017, which was the framework set up to essentially monitor the co-benefits and costs of nature-based solutions across Europe. It was commissioned by the European Commission to guide a lot of the nature-based solutions projects which have since occurred across Europe. But the emphasis in this early work was a systemic approach, which has been taken further through sets and other perspectives, where we emphasised the need to look at the co-production of ecosystem services across biodiversity, ecosystems, climate, and socio-economic and social cultural systems. So very much recognising that an NBS directed to one area, whether it be biodiversity or socio-economic systems, can have co-benefits and costs on other parts of the system. But I suppose the big question in this model, and something that we've been looking at in ENVISION and VIVA plan, is where does social inclusion and belonging fit here? Is it only relevant to the social, economic and social cultural system, or does it have interrelationships with other parts of the system too? So the work that we're currently doing through both ENVISION and VIVA plan are really trying to look at the justice dimensions of both nature-based solutions, but also protected area management in a wider context. So the first project and network I want to talk about today is the ENVISION project, which is co-funded by the Belmont Forum, Biodiversa, and the European Commission. It has a range of partners as featured here with the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences Coordinator. Just to clarify, I have a dual affiliation with SLU and University of Helsinki, and this project was one in my earlier role at SLU prior to moving to University of Helsinki. But the real context to this work is that protected areas, both in urban as well as regional contexts, have a range of pressures, including forestry, climate change, mining, pressures on new governance regimes, tourism, land use change, as well as how do we actively engage with Indigenous use of natural resources. And there's well, one of the big drivers of this work, at least in the European context, was the Bird and Habitat Directive, which said that despite putting all this emphasis on new protected areas, there is a lack of stakeholder engagement and empowerment in protected area management. And I think some of these ideas are also salient to nature-based solutions in urban context today. In addition to those challenges, there are challenges with respect to balancing conservation goals with economic and social drivers, and problems with consensus-based decision-making, which is really coming out in the literature now around the challenges regarding knowledge co-production on nature-based solutions, that we tend to apoliticize a lot of these co-production processes and forget that different stakeholders have different interests and different identities, which somehow need to be balanced and navigated. So in ENVISION, we're really motivating this concept of inclusive conservation. So how do we balance multiple visions and scenarios for protected area management, where we're trying to connect people to the development of protected area policies and practices, as well as improve biodiversity and human well-being. And we're working across 4 study areas on an urban to rural gradient. So the urban area being a protected area near Utrecht in the Netherlands, it's called Vasterhaag. In the Pomerijn, sorry, in the Utrecht, the Netherlands. Then we have a more of a peri-urban landscape in the Sierra de Guatemala area of Madrid, which is a protected area that's being pressured by urban sprawl. We have more of a rural context in Vasterhaag in Sweden, and a wilderness context in Denali National Park in Alaska. And we're looking at the role of inclusive conservation across these 4 contexts. And what do we really mean by our approach to inclusive conservation? Essentially, we have 6 key pillars to our work. And one is about how do we, first of all, inform biodiversity and protected area management, particularly the EU, the global conservation framework. We also look at how do we consider multiple visions for protected area management and assess the consequences of these visions on management policy, looking at social, cultural, ecological, as well as economic perspectives. Then we present these visions and the consequences of these visions back to diverse stakeholder groups. And we try to measure the social learning that is achieved through new understandings about those consequences. Recognizing that those consequences have a range of uncertainties as well. And therefore we have teams through e.g. Stockholm Resilience Centre looking at how do we identify the uncertainties related to those different consequences for protected area management. And recognizing that we're not in a power vacuum, how do we acknowledge the power relations and rethink governance to take account of those power relations, including those different interests and identities related to those visions? And maybe the interesting network part of this is that we've set up what we're calling inter-site knowledge alliances, as well as local site knowledge alliances. And those inter-site knowledge alliances essentially international outlook. They're involving both civil societies, including WWF and IUCN, as well as local actors working together to understand how to upscale these findings from the 4 sites into a global context. And then we have the local site knowledge alliances, which are very much interested in the local context and how our results can be applied within the protected area at the local scale. And we have a range of activities and results geared towards those 2 levels. Just to make the network a bit more clear, so we have the core project team in the middle involving the academic partners. Then we have that core team interfacing with the 4 knowledge alliances of Denali, Vasta Haag, Madrid, and the Cromer Rhine, or Haringlet has actually changed to the Cromer Rhine. And IUCN and Science Seed as our communication, dissemination, and engagement partners working in partnership with us to communicate and disseminate our results across those alliances. And we develop a range of outputs, for example, fact sheets, which are all professionally designed, looking at a range of topics such as how do we build capacity for resilient and inclusive conservation of cultural landscapes? How do we build a place-based understanding of social ecological dynamics and their consequences, e.g. in Denali? Separate to that, we have quarterly webinars, which are open webinars where anyone across the world can attend on specific topics relevant to inclusive conservation. And this example was from October last year, where we had a broad webinar around the concept of inclusive conservation discussed from a range of different perspectives. Separate to that, we have a very strong focus on developing policy relevant outcomes, and we've just produced a fact sheet on a toolbox for socially inclusive decision making, looking at the set of methods for being more inclusive in terms of protected area management and how to address power dynamics between different stakeholder groups. And separate to that, we also have policy briefs, which are geared towards the inclusive global biodiversity framework. And notice our play on inclusive here, that the global biodiversity framework is very much geared towards biodiversity conservation, but we're really trying to look at how do we address justice concerns, among other needs of diverse actors within this framework. And this policy brief is one way to do that, but we've also had e.g. business breakfasts with members of the European Commission and other key stakeholders to push that agenda. And probably something you may not have heard about, but may be of interest to the NATURA network, is the Panorama Solutions for a Healthy Planet database, which is hosted by IUCN. This is not only for protected areas, but also is a platform for sharing solutions relating to nature-based solutions. It has this emphasis on building blocks for solutions. So not only presenting the solution itself, but different steps towards achieving those solutions. It's presented in a range of languages, including English, French, and Spanish, so that diverse stakeholders across the world can engage with those solutions. So it could be a way to also present your network results. And something that I'm sure you all do is have Twitter campaigns. Something that's quite a bit different in ENVISION is that we have a very strong social media and Twitter strategy underpinning our Twitter campaign, where we not only send random tweets, but we have special algorithms and other tools to actually pick up tweets from a range of different networks related to inclusive conservation. And we also do statistical analysis of all the our Twitter communities and the feeds that are presented to identify those stakeholders that we're effectively engaging with, and also those that we're missing out. For example, this network diagram is highlighting those communities that we're actively engaging with across the globe and those that we're missing out on. And so we can then refine our stakeholder engagement strategies based upon gaps in our Twitter profiles. In terms of forward-looking events, we have like our at the big end of the project, or a big party, which we're calling the ENVISION Festival in Brussels on December 15th, and this will be open to everyone. And should you be in Brussels, then we welcome your participation. It will be run in partnership with the Belgium Ecosystem Services Network Christmas Market, which is an annual event. But we're going to have some high-level speakers there, including the Director General of DG Research and Innovation, which, for those who don't know, is the chief of the environment portfolio of the European Commission. We'll also have the ENVISION film on inclusive conservation, which is a 15-minute film that we've developed through the project, presented there. And it will have a range of different artists, etc., presenting on different aspects of inclusive conservation as part of this festival. And separate to that, we'll have a writing retreat that some of you may be interested in. So that's ENVISION. I'll now, if I have time, switch gears and talk more about VIVA Plan, which is very much focused on the urban context. VIVA Plan is a dynamic multi-site research project funded by Formas, which is an applied research institute in Sweden. It supports, the whole project is designed to support improvements in nature-based solutions design and management, and provide policy guidance on sustainable spatial planning across Sweden and Denmark. And our overarching goal is to develop a sustainable spatial planning framework for revitalising what we're referring to as in-between spaces for social inclusion, biodiversity and wellbeing, including safety and security. So what do we really mean by in-between spaces? Well, in-between spaces is a concept that's coming from the social geography literature, and it's been discussed particularly in relation to residential housing areas. And in VIVA Plan, we're thinking about in-between spaces as not only the nature-based solutions that are established in established green areas, but also the spaces between buildings, the market gardens, the urban gardens, the patios that people may have in their own private homes, which may have both a biodiversity, well-being and inclusion function associated with them. And in this project, we have a specific focus on youth engagement and also vulnerable people who have been either self-identified as vulnerable or identified as vulnerable through national and state government strategies. And this is youth groups involved in activities in the urban plan, which is in Copenhagen. But also interested in how do we foster social inclusion for nature-based solutions across diverse ethnic groups, and also trying to engage with art and other types of initiatives. Recognize some people, for example, seeing this as graffiti or as quite grey and dark spaces, but others seeing this as opportunities for engagement with youth in new ways. So there's a strong emphasis on co-creation and mobilisation of knowledge across planners and residents through a range of different techniques. So the study sites, as mentioned earlier, are focused in Sweden and Denmark, but more specifically, we're focusing on urban plan in Copenhagen, Lawrenceburg in Malmö, Sweden, and Ronna near Stockholm, which all are regarded as vulnerable residential housing areas because they have very high populations of new migrants or high population of unemployed or people on low incomes. We have also developed a knowledge alliance here. I think the bit of the difference with this knowledge alliance is that we have tried to focus not only on city planners, but also bringing in small to medium enterprises like VIVA, as well as international experts, e.g. the director of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives and urban planners from other districts who can inform our work, including Rob Hendricks from the City of Utrecht. We're very much further developing this concept of mosaic governance in VIVA Plan, which is about how do we work across diverse sectors and diverse actors to support sustainable spatial planning and the revitalisation of in-between spaces for health and wellbeing and biodiversity outcomes. And as part of our work, we're drawing upon a range of techniques, including hackathons, ethnography, participatory mapping, focus groups, institutional mapping, ecological analyses to support the goal, which is presented in the leaf on the right. And the themes of our research are divided into 4, which is theme 1, combining participatory mapping and ethnography to identify issues of social inclusion, safety and security in green spaces and meeting spots in vulnerable residential housing areas. Theme 2 is about combining focus groups and interviews with institutional mapping and photo elicitation to identify social networks of important to vulnerable residents and how these networks can be strengthened to address residents' needs. Theme 3 is about building on work packages 1 and 2 to inform the implementation and evaluation of what we're calling hackathons, which are essentially intense co-creation events where we come in with a main challenge of the residents and the city, and we try to solve that within 2 to 3 days. And theme 4, which draws together the insights from the clusters 1 to 3 to inform a sustainable spatial planning framework. So as mentioned, mosaic governance is a strategic effort to develop a mix of governance models and policy interventions to strengthen linkages between municipalities and local communities, to draw upon existing and facilitating new local community groups, and recognising diversity and fragmentation in community and values. I think this paper by Ian Bias back in 2016 and again in 2019 really emphasises the linkages that we're trying to foster in VIVA Plan. Just checking time here. I don't have much time left, but I just wanted to highlight some specific research that we've done in Urban Plan, which I briefly mentioned earlier, but as said, has a very high unemployment rate, low education level, yet interestingly, 81% of people are pleased to live there. So vulnerability does not necessarily relate to self-reported well-being. There is a disconnect there, which is interesting. However, having said that, the Danish government has deemed this area to be a ghetto community and has put them on a ghetto list and essentially trying to gentrify the area to essentially push out a lot of this vulnerability to other parts of Denmark, which has been a hugely controversial and a huge issue not only in the national media, but also in the international media. And so what we were trying to do here is to examine how preferences for nature-based solutions vary with respect to issues of procedural distribution, recognition, justice, and AMA. And we conducted a participatory mapping survey to understand the different values of residents and tried to cluster those values and preferences based upon self-reported justice issues. And some of the values and preferences that we looked at was including areas that people valued for sports, for the environment, for food, for meeting with friends and family, for relaxation, for accessibility, for safety, as well as preferences for urban gardens, for nature restoration, for sport, for meeting places, and for lighting. And we also had a self-report scale for assessing aspects of procedural recognition and distribution justice. And we're able to cluster respondents into 4 areas. Cluster 1, which is respondents which were self-reported low procedure and low recognition justice. Those who reported low recognition and high procedure justice. Those which reported high recognition and low procedure justice, and those who reported high recognition and high procedure justice. And then we essentially categorized the values and preferences, which were spatially explicit based upon those 4 clusters as represented in this figure on the right here. So the bottom left represents cluster 1, which is low procedure, low recognition, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially what we found is that value points were disproportionately located in natural areas overall, and that respondents from all clusters placed disproportionately more values in recreational green areas and coastal beach areas. Yet interestingly, cluster 3, which is high recognition but low procedural justice, placed more values in beach areas, which is this Strand area, than other areas. And there were some other interesting hotspots that emerged from this work that I don't have time to present now. But in terms of activity preferences, they were also disproportionately represented in natural areas, including nature-based solutions. But cluster 2 here, which was high procedural but low recognition justice, these people had a preference for paved built-up areas in terms of meeting places in harbours or creation of urban gardens around residential buildings. So there tends to be some interesting alignment between where people want nature-based solutions and their self-reported justice needs. And we can look at this also as a spectrum from very low procedural justice and recognition justice to high procedure and high recognition justice, and make some conclusions about values and preferences based upon that spectrum. And you can read more about that in this paper, which is soon to be published. So yeah, just to perhaps end this part and to end the presentation, to say that we can actually use clustering methods to look at the relationships between justice, nature-based solutions, and values and preferences for their design and management in the landscapes. And planning for inclusive environmentally justice NVS requires not only incorporating gender perspectives, but a more fluid and intersectional and relational understanding of space, as we've shown in this brief insight here. So that's a very broad wrap up of these 2 networks. Happy to talk more about this via separate communication. Here's my email address, and I can send you these slides, and you can have links to these different project websites through these hyperlinks. But also just a quick marketing of the fact that my research group within all these networks, it's called the Human Nature Transformations Research Group, where we're seeking to connect people, place and prosperity. And that's very much linked to not only VIVA Plan, but to the wider initiatives through the University of Helsinki. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And we are at time. So if you have any questions for Chris on either of the really cool projects that he just presented, feel free to send him an email. And yeah, I can send out that information in another email so that everyone has it. But thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Those were great talks. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you. I'll write you an email, Nancy.
Thanks, Elvia.